Welcome to Excel and Business Math video number 6. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about formula elements and formula tips for business math. Yes, 19 different formula examples. Here's all the examples we're going to see in this video. We're going to talk about math operators used in Excel, math order of operations, comparative operators used in Excel, types of formulas that we'll see in this class. And we're going to have this great formula tip sheet that'll always help us figure out the right setup for our formulas. Now we want to start off by going over to the MOO sheet. This isn't actually MOO. This is math order of operations. And here's a list of our math operators in Excel. Parentheses. Exponents, also known as caret, multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting. Now, when we use more than one math operator in a formula, then we have to worry about the math order of operations. If we didn't follow the math order of operations everywhere on the planet Earth, then everyone would be getting different answers. So here it is. First, do everything in the parentheses. Second, do all exponents. Third, do all multiplication and division left to right. And fourth, do all adding and subtracting left to right. Here's a little short abbreviated version. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want, you can have a little cheat sheet like this with you as you evaluate to remind you which one to do in which order. Now, there are some memorization tricks like please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. There's some other memorization tricks also. But I like to just list the operators like this. And as I'm evaluating, make sure I'm doing it in the right order. Now let's go look at MOO2 for our first example. Now here's a simple example, 8 plus 2 times 2, or 8 plus 2 times 2. Now here's our little order, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we're looking at this first example, there's an addition symbol and a multiplication symbol. Well, looking at this list, multiplying comes first. So I'm definitely going to multiply 2 times 2 to get 4. Rewrite it, and now I'm left with only one operation, adding. So I add them to get 12. If, on the other hand, I wanted to force addition before multiplying, that's where parentheses come in. And there's lots of examples in this business class where we'll do exactly this. Force adding or subtracting before we do some multiplying. So parentheses are handy. For us, it means do addition first, or everything inside the parentheses. So we add to get 10. Rewrite, we're only left with multiplying. 10 times 2 is 20. Now, before we do these examples in Excel, let's go over to our PDF notes. This is page 2 of our notes. And we want to look at example 3 and 4, and then we'll go do them over in Excel. Now, here's our math formula or math expression in parentheses. 8 plus 2 minus 1, and then exponent, that's a caret, meaning exponent 2 times 2. Now, parentheses, those are first, so we have to do those first. I'm going to do the 8 plus 2 and rewrite the whole expression. Then I'm going to subtract, since we still have an operation left in the parentheses, to get 9. Now we have from left to right only two operations, exponent and multiplying. If we wanted to, we look at our little list. Exponents come next, so we will do exponents. Now, what in the world is an exponent? An exponent, or that caret, that's what we'll use in Excel, just means, hey, there's two things. The base, that's the big thing, and then the little thing, that's the exponent. An exponent or caret means take the base and repeat it. How many times? 2 times. And then put a multiplication symbol between each item. So that's what we're going to do. We repeat the big thing, the base, 2 times, and put a multiplication symbol between each. So now we're left with left to right multiplying. 9 times 9 is 81. 81 times 2 is 162. Now here's our second example. 8 plus 2 times, in parentheses, 100 minus 25. So parentheses come first. We do that, we get 75. Two operators. Multiplication comes first. If you're not sure, we look at our list. Multiplying comes first, so 2 times 75, that's 150. We're left with only one operator. We get 158. Now let's go back over to Excel and do this example. Now this is just a straight math example to get some practice, but throughout the class we'll have lots of business examples. I'm going to see if I can type this formula out. So you ready? Equal sign, open parentheses, and then I'm going to arrow up to get that 8. Then use plus, that's a math operator, and arrow up to get the 2. Minus, another math operator, up arrow to get that 1. Close parentheses. Now I do exponent, which is shift 6, arrow up to get my 2, and then times, and up arrow to get the last 2. So that's how we do it in Excel. And guess what? Excel knows the math order of operations. I'm going to Control Enter, and I get 162. That's exactly what we got on paper. Now, there's a cool feature in Excel. You can actually go up to the Formula Ribbon tab. And since I have that cell selected and there's a formula inside, I can go over to Formula Auditing and click this great feature, Evaluate Formula. So I'm going to click, and this Evaluate Formula dialog box will step through and show you how Excel calculates the formula. Now, you can either click the Evaluate button, or because it's highlighted, I can simply use the Enter key. Notice something's underlined, and the thing that's underlined is inside the parentheses. So when I hit Enter, it evaluates it. Oh, look at that. In Excel, it has to go look in all the cell references first. So Enter. It's got the 2. Now it can do the first math operation inside the parentheses. So I hit Enter. It got 10. Now it's got to look in C12. It finds a 1. Now it's going to do the subtraction inside the parentheses. Enter. Look at that. It's got to get rid of the parentheses. Now it's going to look in C13. 9 caret 2. 9 times 9. 81. It's going to look in C14. And finally, 81 times 2. I hope it gets 162. And sure enough, it does. The evaluate formula can be used not just when you have straight math operators, but later in this video, we'll see that there's other types of operators like comparative operators. And evaluate formula will step through and calculate any formula, no matter how simple or complex for you. Sometimes you can use this to track down an error. Where is the error coming from? Step through and find out. Now I'm going to close this. And we're going to do our second example. 8 plus 2 times, in parentheses, 100 minus 25. Equal sign, up arrow to get my 8, plus up arrow to get the 2, times, in parentheses, up arrow to get the 100, minus my 25, close parentheses. When I Control Enter, it gets exactly the same number as we did it on paper, 158. Now let's look at a business example. We need to calculate something called cost of goods sold. Any retail business has to do this every accounting period, also known as COGS, for cost of goods sold. Here's our product. At the beginning of the period, we had 100 aspens. Aspen is a boomerang. So there's the product. We had 100 of them at the beginning of the period. And then at the end of the period, we went and counted on the shelf. The end quantity was 50. So we counted 50. That means if we're trying to find out the value of how many we sold, we have to take whatever we started with, subtracted how many we had on the shelf at the end of the period, and that will tell us how many items we sold. Now, we can do this in our head. 100 minus 50 is 50. So we actually had 50 on the shelf at the end, and we also sold 50. If the value of each is $10, if we multiply 50 times 10, we would get the total cost of all the goods sold. All right, so our formula in accounting would be end quantity minus beginning quantity times the value. Since we have to force the subtraction before the multiplying, that's where our parentheses come in. There's our formula. Let's go ahead and do it. Equals open parentheses, and I'm going to up arrow to get begin quantity minus up arrow to get end quantity, close parentheses, times that 10 bucks. And when I enter, 500 bucks. So order of operations in Excel, as we saw here. And we're not going to really do it on paper in this class, but I had to show you at least a few examples. Now, we need to go talk about something else. CO sheet here, that stands for comparative operator. Comparative operators. Yes, we can ask a bunch of logical questions. We can ask if two things are equal. That means we'd use the equal sign, not as the first character in the cell, but in the middle of the formula, and we'll see an example of that. Not, I don't think we get to use that one in this class, but you'd have to type less than and greater than symbol back to back, and then Excel would know that that means not. That means you would be asking the question, are these two things not equal? Greater than. You definitely sometimes want to know, did you pass the sales bonus hurdle to get a bonus? So you might ask, are your sales greater than? You might also ask, are your sales greater than or equal to? Now, in math, we have a single symbol for that. But in many computer systems and here in Excel, we have to type two characters, a greater than and then an equal symbol. And we'll have to use that one a lot when we get to payroll and we're figuring out bonuses and things like that. We also have the comparative operator, are you less than? And also, are you less than or equal to? Now, here's our two examples on this sheet, and then we'll have at least two other examples in this video. Now, in accounting, when you have a bunch of numbers, there is left and right. And in accounting, they call left debit and right credit. And in accounting, debits always have to equal credits. Now, we can clearly see with our eyes that debits equal credits. But accountants like to make sure. And since Excel formulas do not make mistakes, but we humans do, we're going to build a logical formula that will deliver true when the two numbers are in balance and false when they're not in balance. Now, anytime you use one of these comparative operators in a formula, you're building what is called a logical formula. And the only result from a logical formula is true or false. Now, I'm going to click in the cell, type an equal sign. I'm going to use my left arrow to get the debits. And then I'm going to use in my formula a comparative operator. Notice the equal sign as the first character in the cell always defines this as a formula. But if we use the equal sign somewhere else in the formula, it's a comparative operator. And I'm going to ask the question, hey, debits, are you equal to arrow, arrow, the credit side? So, of course, when I hit enter, it delivers true. What? False. That's why we use formulas. The formula is always going to get it right. When we see false, that means we have some trouble over here. Now, this trouble is simple. Someone just accidentally decreased the decimals. Highlight both cells, go up to the number group, and increase the decimals once and twice. And sure enough, there's the problem. We can clearly see up here if we're adding debits and credits. In accounting, both of these numbers would have to be the same. So what our formula telling us false did is it alerted us as accountants that we need to go investigate and find out, is this amount really 149 or is it 150? So our logical formula was helping us proof, in essence, if two numbers were equal. Now let's go look at our next example, and this is a payroll example. And our table shows employee name and their sales amount. These are sales rep, and these are their sales for the period. And their employment contract says if they have $55,000 or more of sales, they get a bonus. That means for each employee, we have to compare the number. So for Abdi, I have to ask the question, are the sales for Abdi greater than or equal to 55,000? Well, that would be true. Down here for Sue is 37,251 and 6 pennies. Is that greater than or equal to 55,000? False. So instead of doing it by hand and risking error, or more to the point, if we had 50 employees, I do not want to do each one individually. So instead, we'll do a logical formula. Equal sign tells Excel this is a formula. Left arrow, employee sales. And then I need to do the comparative operator, greater than or equal to. Now remember, there's no such thing as a single greater than or equal to character in Excel like there is in math when you're writing it on paper. In Excel and many computer systems, we have to type two characters, and the equal sign always comes last. So greater than or equal to, and then I'm going to click on the hurdle. Now I need to lock that as I copy down, so I hit the F4 key. Now notice what this is doing. The bigger side of the greater than symbol is pointing towards the number. So it's saying, hey, are you bigger than or equal to whatever the hurdle is? Now I can Control Enter, and I'm going to double click and send this down. I go to the last cell and hit F2. The cell references are looking good. Now I clearly have my patterns of trues and falses, but wait a second. Poor Miki, she says, yes, but I got 55,000 and your formula didn't work. Well, as we know, Excel formulas don't make mistakes. It's us, the driver of the Excel spreadsheet, who's making a mistake. So it looks like we simply need to increase the decimals 1, 2 times, and oh, what a bummer. 1 penny short. But sure enough, that formula is 100% correct. That number is not bigger than or equal to 55,000. Now I want you to notice something. As I described this problem here, I used 3 different phrases to represent greater than or equal to. I first started off by asking the question of a particular sales number. I said, hey, is that number $55,000 or more? Then I asked, hey, is it greater than or equal to 55,000? And just a moment ago on this one, I said, is the number bigger than or equal to 55,000? So anytime we are required to use a comparative operator, there is not going to be consistent language, especially when you get to things like employment contracts, payroll contracts, tax tables. They all use all sorts of different words to describe a particular comparative operator. So I made a little table over here. Let's go click on the sheet Comparative Operators and Words. Now, for equals, it's pretty much always equals. But when you see greater than, you might see the word greater than, more than, or above. Those are all synonyms that mean the greater than symbol. Now for the greater than or equal to comparative operator, these are all the different phrases or words or synonyms you might see. Greater than or equal to. I like this phrase because it describes exactly what we have to type into Excel. But you might also see at least, no less than, or X or more. So for example, if I had 5,000 as the number we're comparing to the hurdle, and by the way, a hurdle, that's just something you need to jump over in order to get a true. But if we apply the words, this number right here has to be at least 2,000, that means the smallest it can be is 2,000. Notice it follows the same logic as greater than or equal to, because this can be at least 2,000. That means it can be exactly equal to 2,000 or anything above. Similarly, no less than. That means this number can't be less than 2,000. If it was less than 2,000, that would give us a false. Notice if it's not less than, then it has to be exactly equal to or above. We might also see X or more. In fact, I used that phrase just a moment ago when we were doing our payroll example. That means this number right here has to be equal to 2,000 or more. All right, so this table has phrases or wording or synonyms for each one of the comparative operators. So if you get in trouble when you're reading a description, especially like I said and mentioned earlier, tax tables are famous for using language like at least and no less than. But if you get in trouble, just come look up the word here and then figure out which comparative operator it is. All right, now we want to go look at our next sheet, formula elements. And at the top of this sheet in yellow, and this is also in our PDF notes, is a complete list of all the topics we should be considering every time we create a formula. Now, on this sheet, if we scroll down, we're going to have 9 amazing examples that will show us all the different types of formulas that we might use in this class, re-illustrate and reconfirm Excel's golden rule. We'll see examples of all of these formula elements. We'll go through the math order of operations. We'll remind ourselves how to use round, and we'll even see 2 important hints about the sum function. Now, formula elements. Up to this point in this video, we have seen a bunch of different formula elements. That just means things that we can put into formulas. Well, I've listed them all here. These are all the different things that in this class we will see in our formulas. We're definitely always going to have an equal sign as the first character. We can have cell references like relative cell reference or absolute cell reference, a relative range of cells, or an absolute range of cells. We definitely can use math operators. We can type numbers into our formula if they don't change, like 12 months in a year. We can use built-in functions like the sum function or the round function. And we can use comparative operators. So throughout the rest of this entire business math class, this sheet can be your guide to creating formulas. Now let's go and look at our 9 examples. We're going to start with example number 9 so far in this video. Now, the goal here is to calculate the average and maximum values for each quiz. So we can see students and a number of quizzes. I just need a formula that will calculate the average, copy it over, and the max, copy it over. This type of formula is going to be a number formula. And in this class, we just see basically formulas that calculate numbers, and we'll see logical formulas. The formula elements we'll see in these formulas, equal sign, built-in function, relative range of cells. All right, so in cell C45, I'm calculating the average. So I know equals AVER. I see my function highlighted in blue, so I hit Tab. I'm going to select all of the scores for quiz number 1. And this is actually the first time we've seen this. That's a range of cells, but because there's no dollar signs, it's a relative range of cells. That means when we copy the average function over to each new column, it'll properly look at all of the numbers above. Close parentheses, Control Enter, copy it to the side. Click and drag. Go to the last cell and hit F2 to verify. And sure enough, our relative range of cells is working fine. We've calculated the average for each quiz. Now the max we can use, as we learned a couple videos ago, average and max are called aggregate functions because They look at a bunch of numbers and calculate a single answer. Close parentheses, Control Enter, copy it to the side. Go to the last cell, hit F2. So we've accomplished our goal. We calculated the average and max for each quiz. Example number 9, we need to calculate monthly insurance expense. This is a number formula because we're calculating a number. We'll see equal sign, cell reference, math operator, and of course a number. This formula is straightforward. Equal sign, up arrow to get the annual expense, math operator division, and I'm typing the number in the cell. Since 12 months in a year will never change, we can simply type it in. And when I hit Enter, there is the monthly allocation or the monthly insurance expense. All right, let's go look at example number 10. Oh, goal. We already did this once already in this video. We want to calculate COGS, cost of goods sold. But here we have a bunch of different products. We're going to come over here, and I'm going to type an equal sign. And I first need to take whatever we started with and subtract the end quantity. So I'm going to arrow over. That's the begin amount. Minus, and I'm going to arrow over to get end quantity. And that'll calculate the difference, which we can do this one in our head. That means we sold 50. And I'm going to multiply left arrow times the value of each one. Control Enter. Minus 400, F2. Of course, the order of operations for math performs multiplication first and then does subtraction. So if we want the subtraction to occur first, we better force subtraction to calculate before multiplication with parentheses. Remember, Excel does know the order of operations. Control Enter and double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. There it is. For the Sunset Boomerang product, we started with 54. We ended up with 51, which means, I think I can do that in my head, we sold 3. So 3 times 12, when I hit Enter, 36. Luckily, we didn't have to do that in our head. We just, as the designer of this worksheet Excel solution, we just had to make sure that we created the correct formula. All right, and in this example here, we saw equal sign, parentheses, a bunch of relative cell references, math operator subtraction, and multiplication. I'm going to hit Enter. Example number 11. Our goal is to calculate the deduction for each employee, then calculate a total for deductions. It tells us that the tax rate is 0.1675. The type of formula, of course, this is a number formula. And here's the list of our formula elements. Now, when we're thinking about this list over here, and by all means, you can print that page out from your PDFs and always have it around. Well, we can read through this, and there's a couple things we're going to need to think about. The first off is if we're given a particular number of formula input that can change, we have to remember Excel's golden rule. Not only that, but because we're going to be doing some calculation and using the formula results in other formulas, meaning we're going to add the total deductions, we have to think about whether we need to use the round function. All right, so example number 11, I'm going to come off to the side and type tax rate. Control Enter. I am going to add some formatting. So fill red, font white, some border. Next video, actually, we'll talk about style formatting. We'll have a video just on that. And our tax rate, 0. Remember, we don't have to type in the 0. I just have to type a decimal, 1675, and then Enter. It puts in the lead 0 for us. So that's us following Excel's golden rule. Now, we can already see that this is a decimal. And we're dealing with money, right? That's one of the requirements for round. When we're dealing with money, we are required to round because we only have pennies, right? And these are employees' paychecks, so we need to pay out in pennies and be accurate. So we have extraneous decimals. And we're going to add all of these formula results in a subsequent formula. all three conditions for requiring us to use round are met. So I come up here and I'm going to type round function. Right in the number argument, I can build my formula. Left arrow to get gross pay. That's a relative cell reference. So as we copy down, it'll always see the right gross pay. Times right arrow to get my tax rate, and I need to lock it. So I'm going to use the F4 key. As I copy down, every cell needs to be locked looking at tax rate, comma. And our rule for number of digits, that is, which position do we want to round to? We're going to count on our fingers from the decimal 1, 2. So since it's the penny position, that requires that we put a 2. When we put number of digits 2, it tells round to the penny position. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and copy it down. Now we can go to the last cell and use our keyboard for the sum function, Alt equals, and Enter. And now we have accomplished our goal, deductions for each employee, and the total. If you wanted to be safe, if someone gave you this is what I do. Notice it was already formatted with currency. So I'm going to come up and click the drop down for general just to make sure there's no extraneous decimals. And there's not. Remember, that sum function is looking at exactly whole pennies. So that total is correct. Now I'm going to Control Z because I want to undo applying the general formatting and go back to the previous currency number formatting. All right, example number 12. Our goal is to calculate whether or not each student earned an honors badge. Honors is assigned when the average quiz score is greater than 22.5. I already see greater than, so it sounds like a comparative operator. Here's our students. Here's all the quizzes. The average. We first have to calculate the average before we can determine true or false they earned honors. So in this cell, I'm going to type equals, and we're going to use the built-in function average. When I type AVER, I hit Tab. Now I'm going to highlight the range. These are the relative cell references, 4 cells to the left for each student. Now, earlier when we studied aggregate functions, we actually don't have to type that close parentheses if we have just a single range. So I'm going to Control Enter. If I wanted to verify, I could look up into the formula bar. I see the close parentheses. Now I can come and double click and send this down. Go to the last cell in F2. Now we need to check whether each average quiz score is greater than our hurdle of 22.5. Whoops. That's the formula input. We're definitely going to have to follow Excel's golden rule. I'm going to type hurdle for honors badge and enter. 22.5 and enter. I better add some formatting. I'm going to highlight those 2 cells, go up and add all borders. Then I'm going to click in the cell, click the drop down for fill red and font white. Maybe I need to increase the column width. Now I can build a true-false formula. I use an equal sign. That tells Excel I'm doing a formula. Left arrow to get relative cell reference for the student's average quiz score greater than. Notice it doesn't say greater than or equal to. It's just it has to be bigger. So that has to be bigger than the hurdle. And I'm going to hit the F4 key to lock it. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. I see the cell references, relative cell reference and absolute are correct, and Enter. And now I see, looks like Tyrone and Gigi earned honors. All right, let's go look at example number 13. I'm using the wheel on my mouse to scroll down. All right, our goal for our formula. Create formula to determine whether we need to reorder. If n quantity is less than 75, we must reorder. So it sounds like we have a comparative operator, right? And we want a true, false. True would mean we need to reorder. False means we do not need to reorder. We definitely have a hurdle here, and that is a formula input that can potentially change. Remember what we said in our video about Excel's golden rule. If you're not sure whether a formula input will change, put it in a cell and label it. So 75 will be our hurdle, and then I'm going to add a label. I did that backwards. Hurdle to reorder and enter. Ooh, look at that. It auto-formatted, which is a setting in our default settings. That's OK. I'm going to click here and change it to red. So I'm going to say fill. Now I'm going to highlight both cells and click the all borders. Again, next video we'll learn more about style formatting. All right, but now I have my formula input. Equal sign, left arrow. Well, I need to check if it's less than, because I want a true saying I need to reorder. So that has to be less than whatever this hurdle is in cell G104. I want that locked, so I hit the F4 key. Control-Enter, double-click and send it down. Oh, it looks like we need to order the Aspen, Bellin, and Sunset. I want to make sure and check the last cell, F2. Cell references looking good. Enter. All right, we have a few more examples. I'm going to scroll down. The goal for this formula is to calculate commission for each employee, then calculate a total for commissions. The commission rate is 0.025. So it looks like we have an employee sales, and a commission, which we'll get to learn in our payroll section of the class, is when the employee contract says, you go ahead and make all your sales, and the payment we'll give you is a certain decimal amount or percentage amount. You can think of it like this. The contract says, hey, for every dollar that you sell, we're going to give you 2.5 pennies. All right, that's a formula input. It could potentially change. So I'm going to come off to the side, type a label, add some formatting, and then type my 0.025. Control-Enter. I'm going to add an all border. All right, we have our formula input. Now let's create our formula. Oh, but wait a second. Do we have to use the round function? Well, let's check. Do we have to round? Yes, this is money. We have to round to the penny. Do we have extraneous decimals in our formula result? We definitely have the potential here. We're multiplying decimals. I already see extraneous decimals there past the penny position. And third, each one of these formula results, we're definitely going to be using those in a subsequent formula. So I'm going to click in cell D117 and type ROU. I see my round function and tab. Right in the number argument, we can build our formula. Left arrow to get sales as a relative cell reference, times right arrow to get the commission rate, and F4 to lock it, because as we copy down, we need every cell to be locked on commission rate. I type a comma. Number of digits, we need to tell round. To round to the penny position, 1, 2, so I type a 2. Close parentheses. Control-Enter. And I want to show you something important here. Sometimes we click and drag manually. Other times we double-click. Now, this is a circumstance where we don't want to double-click. The reason why is if I double-click, the formula will automatically look to see if there's something to the left and stop when it sees an empty cell. I definitely don't want it going all the way down to the total row. That's going to have a different formula. In fact, if I do it, double-click and send it down, I get an error because it's trying to multiply a word times a commission rate. So Control-Z. If you don't have anything, meaning the same numbers all the way down and there's nothing in the last cell, then you double-click and send it down. But since we do not want the formula to go all the way down, we have to do it manually. Copy it down. Click in the last cell, F2. The cell references are working. Enter. Alt equals to invoke our sum function. We see that it's got the right range, and enter. There is our solution. We are looking at different formula elements. F2, equal sign starts the formula. Built-in round function, relative cell reference, absolute math operator, and a hard-coded number because that number's not going to change. Enter. Down here, F2, equal sign, built-in function, and that's just a range of cell. We don't think of this as a relative range of cell because we're not copying the formula. All right, I'm going to hit Enter. All right, we have two last examples, and these have to do with the sum function, example 15 and 16. Now, here's some amounts, and here's a formula that I do not want you ever to create, F2. Someone didn't know about the sum function. They used the plus symbol many times. Now, there's two problems with this. One is it takes a long time to create. I'm going to hit Enter, and I'll show you the second problem with that in just a second. Long time to create, sum function with the keyboard, Alt equals. That's quick and easy to create. I see that it got the right range. I hit Enter. Here's the other reason we never want to use plus, 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 plus. This is a list of expenses. And anytime we build an Excel solution, we want it to be updatable. Let's just imagine someone forgot car expense. Well, if I come to row 134 and I see that black sideways medium size arrow, I can right-click that row header. And when I point to Insert, it will insert a row. OK, no problem. Now I type car, tab, and I'm going to just put 500. And watch what happens when I hit tab. That does not update. Watch what happens when I type 500 and Enter. That one totally updates. So something like this, F2, is never going to pick up if we change the structure of our table. It's not going to pick up that extra expense. Enter. But this one right here, F2, totally no problem. In fact, when we use a range with a colon, it always says go from the first one to the last one and everything in between. So when we inserted a row and Excel pushed everything down, it totally changed from D137, which is where it used to be, to D138. I'm going to hit Enter. Now, here's the other hint about the sum function. Almost every quarter that I teach this class, or every couple of quarters, F2, I get someone that hands in formulas like this. They do all their math calculations, but put them inside the sum function. Now, way back in the beginning history of spreadsheets, you did have to follow this convention sometimes. But this is no longer true. There's two problems with doing this. One is it overcomplicates the formula. So when you're looking at it, it's too complicated. And it actually makes Excel calculate an extra step, which takes longer. Now, we're not going to see that. But don't do formulas like this. This makes the formula overcomplicated. Enter. It will work because the sum function is just adding a number that was already there. If I'm going to make a formula, equal sign, up arrow, divided by 12, don't put it in the sum function because it's unnecessary. And Enter. All right, now one last example, example number 17. Now, I just copied and pasted this down here, but I got to show you something about the arrow keys to get cell references for formulas. All right, so I selected that cell, and I'm looking down. This is called the status bar. These are the sheet tabs, and below this gray bar is called the status bar. We looked at this for a moment in our first video. But now I want you to notice something. It says ready down there. And what ready means is we're allowed to do something to the cell. Now, I'm going to not delete the formula. I'm just going to create a new one. And watch what happens when I type an equal sign. Now it says Enter down in the status bar. And Enter means you can use your arrow keys to get cell references. So if I up arrow, I'm totally allowed to get cell references. Now, as soon as I'm using my arrow keys to get cell references, now the status bar says point because I'm pointing to a cell reference. Now I want to use the escape key to revert back to what was in the cell before I created that formula. And now I want to try this again. Notice it says ready. That means it's ready for me to do something to the cell. I type an equal sign. No problem. Enter means I can use my arrow keys to get cell references. But watch this. I accidentally interfere and click in there. Now it says edit. Watch what happens when I use my up and down arrow. Up, 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 down, down, down. No way. It's not going to get cell references now. If I use the left and right arrow, edit means that the arrow keys will move left and right through the formula. So now I'm going to right arrow to get to the end. If I accidentally get in that mode and I want to get back into enter mode so I can use my arrow keys, I have to hit the F2 key. As soon as I hit F2, now it says enter. Now I can use my arrow keys. So once in a while, that will happen. You'll be trying to use your arrow keys to put cell references in. If it doesn't work, just hit F2. Then you're back in enter mode. You can put in your cell reference, build the rest of your formula, and hit enter. All right, that was a pretty epic video all about formulas. On this sheet, formula elements, we actually saw 10 examples of formulas and formula elements. We saw all the different possibility of things for Excel formulas that we will see in this business math class. Now, control home. Don't remember this yellow sheet, which is here on formula element sheet, also in the PDF notes. This is like your cheat sheet. Every time you make a formula, you can look at this kind of as a checklist to see if you're building an efficient formula. Now, in this video, we saw all the different formula elements on this sheet. Back on CO, we learned about comparative operators for the first time and logical formulas. Over on the sheet MOO2, we talked about order of operation, and we saw a few different number formulas or formulas where we practice our order of operations. Hey, if you like that video, thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun, including our next video in this class, video number 7, where we'll talk about style formatting. All right, we'll see you next video.